Welcome to the 2-minute warning interview, where we take a look at the global energy transition and ask the critical question, what's next in this global push? Very glad to have 𝖤𝖷𝖢𝖫𝖵 with us today. He is the Global Chief Sustainability Officer at JLL. Hi, Richard.
Hi there, Michelle, and very pleased to be with you today.
Thank you. And let's start with some broad strokes. The IEA have tracked about 66 billion worth of funding for energy efficiency related measures announced as part of the government stimulus package, with a huge 26 billion allocated to the building sector. How can such investments and efforts towards green recovery spur climate innovation in this sector? What would you hope to see this year?
Well, first of all, I think there's massive opportunity if the built environment is responsible for 40% of all carbon emissions. It should be a lot of opportunity there. That would be the first thing. So when we start looking at carbon and looking at the built environment, carbon comes about in two forms. It either comes about in the operation of a building, so you've got a building up there, and you use carbon, the energy that goes in to heat, to cool, and light it. So that's one aspect of innovation, on the operational efficiency. The other is perhaps on the construction of the building, because whilst real estate is responsible for 40% of carbon, 25% comes out of the operation of a building, and 15% is in the embodied carbon, the carbon that goes into the construction of a building, into the fit out of a building. We can split it into those two areas. So when you start looking at where technology, where innovation can come in, first of all, obviously the renewable side, which is one aspect, but that is outside of the built environment. But the other aspect is increasing efficiencies, reducing the demand on energy in the first place, reducing the intensity of use. And that is through the likes of sensors. It's like the use of software. There's a classic case that we're involved in. We were an early investor in a company called 𝖘𝘃𝗲𝗍, and they are repurposing a 19th century. So it's an old motor. The technical design on it is 19th century motor, the way it works. But what they've applied to it is software that increases the intensity of the efficiency of use. So this is the low-hanging fruit, I suppose, of the air conditioning units you see hanging off buildings, sitting on top of shopping centres, that sort of aspect. And if by use of more efficient software, we're able to drive down the energy requirement by 50%, then you're using 50% less carbon, and on that, you're saving 50% into the bargain of your actual energy costs. So it's sort of a win-win any which way. And we were a very early investor, part of our investment arm into green prop tech. But I saw this week, Bill Gates has now come into the same, is now a supporter. He's part of a consortium that's just put in another 80 million into that. So people are believing in that sort of in that sort of innovation to go forward. I think one of the biggest issues in the real estate industry is managing data, because it's only with the use of the data you can actually then use it, analyze, and then project the improvements. And
indeed, without that clean data, you're not going to get sustainable solutions. How progressive do you think that is in the real estate market? The use of digital.
I would say we've got a long way to go. Data platforms and the real-time transfer of data. If we're looking for innovation to help us, being able to count what we're using would be, and there'll be loads of companies out there who will say, well, we can do that. There are, but there's no accepted standard measures here at the moment. And that is what we require. We manage on behalf of our clients 1,500 times the amount of space that we ourselves occupy. So therefore, and every company might be using a different system. but we need somewhere to pull it all together so that we can manage it together properly. And that's—
How would you see that standardization happen? How would you see that happen? What would you like to see?
Well, it's going to come from the likes of the major managers of real estate, the major facility managers of real estate, being able to pull it together and being able, perhaps through cooperation, non-competitive collaboration would be a good way forward. And
but is that likely to happen in the next couple of years? Because I'm sure this has been something that's been on the cards for a while. Is it?
There is collaboration going on in the
yes.
And because it's in all of our interests, we have to do something about this in order to get through to where we need to get through. There are big targets out there that we've all got to achieve. We have to achieve net zero by 2050. Otherwise, for my children and my grandchildren, I would fear for what future we'll be leaving them.
So do you think that the momentum to get such an agreement in place, it's a huge undertaking, of course, it's complex, there's a lot of different parties involved, and we're talking on a global basis, different regions, different temperatures, different volumes, different geographies to deal with as well. So there's a huge amount of complexity involved. But do you see such a united industry commitment being made by, say, 2025? Is that a realistic sort of timescale with these pressures that we're facing?
The data platforms are one thing. It have to be
possibly the simplest part.
Well, possibly the simplest part, but equally so, the metrics upon which you are reporting is also, we also need a consistency there. You know, at the moment, working with 𝖤𝖷𝖢𝖫 at the moment, the big four accountancy firms are all working together, which is fantastic, trying to common metric and for reporting. And that is a typical case of collaboration in the market, where we agree the metrics and then we start reporting, in which case, if we're all reporting on the same way, then the data will be structured to come forward in that format.
But what sort of time frame are we looking to see something like that for the global real estate industry, or even on a regional basis, having that kind of cohesion so that the data and the metrics and the reporting and the analysis and the real-time benefits can start to flow through? How long do you think that will take?
It will take time, because there is transformation to get from where we are today to where we're going. But we know we've got targets out there for 2050 to be net zero. That's the big shout for this year.
Yes.
The race to net zero and COP26. So there will be a big push from corporates on one side. There'll be an even bigger push from governments this year, because that's what this is about, trying to get uniformity. Thank God we've got the US back in, and I think there is a chance that with the US there, we can actually get some consistency of approach to the issues that are ahead of us. Which,
from your point of view, how fast do things need to start moving to do? I mean, it doesn't sound, historically they haven't had the impetus, the global push like we've seen last year and the year before. There's many different sectors, and of course not just real estate, that are changing their ways. What would you hope to see progress-wise by 2025? If you had a wish list, what would you hope was the status by 2025? Just your wish list.
Yeah, what's interesting is I sort of look at this even longer term.
But surely we have to make progress by 2025 in order to get anywhere near the 2050 targets.
Yes, we do, and we've got to make progress by 2030. I have to say, my pathways are taking. So when you look at a company like ours, we have a vehicle fleet. We need pathways for them to get down to zero, which we're trying to do by 2030. Our buildings, again, by 2030. The air travel, we're looking at reducing. So much of this, so we have pathways that will take us from 2020 to 2050, and we're back where we should be by 2025. And it's, I have to say, it's absolutely different in every single part, be it electrification of your fleet, be it taking on particularly renewable energy for your buildings, or air travel, for instance, where we have gone down massively during 2020. What is a realistic estimate as to pre-COVID levels of air travel should we be going to on a per employee basis? You know, should we be going to 50%? Yeah, most people's air travel over companies like ours will have reduced in 2025.
Huge, yeah.
At least 70%. But how much of that can we maintain? How much of that, the use of, you know, on Zoom we're on at the moment, how much of that can we carry on with going?
And of course, if the aviation industry starts to decarbonize as they so plan, especially by 2030 with different and lower carbon fuels, then that need to reduce won't be as stark as it may be in another market that perhaps hasn't decarbonized as fast as it planned to, such as EVs, for example.
Yeah, the green, well, I think EVs, we're quite comfortable at 2030. We're quite happy, I think, going to be making that sort of commitment. Aviation, yeah, it's not my own market. We look at it, whether we can get green aviation fuel around the world, because you remember there are massive geographic differences here. The supply of renewables to start with, and it's not just the renewables themselves, but how you can access them. Because if you're not running a grid like Germany or the UK might be, it is actually far more difficult to actually move those renewables around. But aviation fuel will be absolutely crucial. But aviation for us makes up only about 0.5% of our footprint. Our big carbon footprint is our clients' buildings that we manage.
And physical structures.
Our clients is where we need to be focusing our attention. Out of the clients we're looking at, talking to them about their sustainability agendas and their investment, 75% are either maintaining their existing agendas or they're increasing their investment in them. And 25% are not, they're reducing them, but that might be because they're under incredible issues just to survive. I mean, there are great financial deprivation out there for a raft of companies.
Indeed, there's that survival aspect as well in terms of, you know, the need to transition to a lower carbon economy. In the end, brings a lot of economic bounce back and a good rate on return. But for now, so fresh from COVID, there is certainly a survival issue going on. If you had to choose or select a country or region even that is doing well when it comes to greening their building industry, what stands out to you? Who stands out that we can learn from?
I think particularly Northern Europe, I would look at Sweden, Germany, the UK would tend to be ahead. So there's in the US, so we can't, I mean, just because of what went on over the last 4 years, we can't forget that they are streets ahead in certain industries. And so if we can, you make the point that if you can show it's worthwhile doing it, I mean, and there are so many proof points coming out now. If we look at shareholders, and we respond to shareholders, but shareholders want to see companies that have proven ESG credentials, and they do that because the performance is better. If you look at, we've set a science-based target at JLL. Now that is till 2034. But for every dollar that we're investing in order to achieve that target, the calculation is we will get $1.50 back. So it makes financial sense. It's a 16% IRR and it's a payback after 5 years. And then that's where we get it back. So it does take initial investment, but over the longer term, which this has to be, we've also now got figures, and they're only initial ones, where green buildings are actually letting at higher rents, 6 to 8% higher rents coming out of green buildings.
Because renters want to be in a greener building, or because the efficiency of the building is such that it makes it more economic?
Well, it's a combination of the two. You know, operational efficiency is one, but also, we're looking for a new building at the moment in London. There is no secret about that, but we would be looking for one with green credentials attached to it. And that is, and on top of the increased rent, you're seeing reduced vacancy periods. You know, when you're building, it's out there, come and rent it, but tenants will take up a green building more quickly than a non-green building, and the resultant investment will be worth a higher capitalization, a higher multiplier as a result of that. So there's value being created out of green.
On several layers. You just touched upon Northern Europe and obviously London just now as well, which is known for a lot of its much older buildings, full of character, full of history, but older and hugely inefficient as well. From that point of view, do you think a lot of progress still needs to be made to upskill the, of course, while sustaining the character and so on, but upscaling and essentially upskilling the building to make it lower carbon for the future? How's that going?
Yeah, well, that's where,
it sounds tricky.
Not just London. It's sort of anywhere. There's 70% of the building stock out there at the moment is still going to be the same building stock in 2050. You know, we're not doing it. We're not knocking.
Not rebuilding the world.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to retrofit. And how are we going to retrofit? That's where these building efficiencies come in. It's a cladding, it's a heating system, it's a, well, there's water and waste that come into this because we can't ignore those from a carbon perspective. But it's the actual efficiency that goes into it, as well as, and we can't, Bill Gates is interesting in that he actually doesn't worry about the intensity of use. He's more concerned about what the energy supply is, because he's probably a very big investor in green aviation fuel and green solar powered stations and wind. But as he says, if you multiply it by zero, the answer is zero. However much you use. And there is a logic in it. And so let's not underestimate the importance of driving our renewable, our access to renewables and making sure that's in place. But that still doesn't get away from the fact of where we're building, we have to decarbonize the product. We have to reuse everything that we've got rather than chucking it to landfill and developing with a whole raft of new carbon.
You just touched on wastewater there as well. Is that something that you're focusing on quite a bit with the broader sustainability picture and the need to improve the use of wastewater and recycling it as well?
Well, if you, we have, on behalf of our clients, we have a massive procurement spend. And it is one of our targets is to reduce the amount of carbon that is in the products that we procure on behalf of our clients. And that could cover all aspects of running a building. It's not just the heating, but even if you are looking at, catering, for instance, a part of what we will include within our facilities management, the carbon that goes into catering also plays a part. Packaging, massive. You've seen the issue Amazon have had. But packaging of food stuff is important, as well as the food that you're using itself. A vegetarian diet is going to use less carbon than the meat-based ones. So
does water fit into that picture when it comes to how you directly work with your clients and the sustainability model that you're looking at? Does water fit into that picture and better utilization from not just obviously consumption, but in terms of the actual post-industrial use, post-corporate use?
Yes, it certainly does. I have to say it is not the major part of what we're doing and trying to influence across all of our client base.
I wouldn't expect it to be. No, it's not. Yeah. It
is certainly there, especially with the heavy manufacturers. But heavy manufacturers, to be honest, the big global manufacturers are already on that case about water use. We do have some influence with some of our clients in UAE at the moment, where we're working with them, but theirs is desalination plants it to solar, so we can actually get solar working with desalination, so we're creating zero energy water supply. So those sort of things we can certainly have an impact.
Looking ahead for the next year, if you had to give advice to not just 𝖤𝖲 but other real estate companies, what would be your main point of advice to focus on to improve sustainability in the sector? What would be your request that everybody did?
I think ours is going to be the same as most other industries in this year, 2021. We can all talk about getting back to the office and reimagining the office, because that will change. The getting back to work, how we work will change. But for 2021, it is all about net zero. It has to be that focus to November in Glasgow, because the commitments that countries are going to make, the commitments that companies are going to make, have to take us to 2050. Paris worked about setting out an agenda. It was idealistic. It did not tell us we have to do it. This is
the devil's in the details, isn't it?
Exactly. And hopefully we will get that together this year, because that is the most important thing out there. Everything else should be working towards it. Circularity, all the other things we've spoken about. But if we can't get to net zero, and you were dead right, forcing me on what's our 2025 commitment, because if we don't get all this done, the easy bit done by 2030, we've got a hope going forward. The difficult things are sequestrating carbon from the air. Technology will get us, innovation will get us there, but it's not going to happen in the first 10 years. We do have some stuff to get on with, the low-hanging fruit that we could do now. And whether that's 2025 or 2030, but 2030 we have to do it.
Excellent, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of insights there for us to chew on. So thank you very much.
Well, Michelle, thank you very much indeed. Pleasure being with you.